Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Chaotic Entertainment. I'm your host, Dan, and today I'll be giving my thoughts on the new demo for Hello Neighbor 2 by Eerie Guest and tinyBuild. This is the second game in the main series, meaning this game should hopefully focus more on spooky house exploration and less on monster trucks and Discount Among Us. For a little bit of background, I actually did a full review of the first game on my old channel. It was the first review I ever really did, which is a bit of a shame because I would have loved for my first work to have been a positive one, not 10 minutes of me shitting all over the hard work and effort of a mid-sized indie studio. The game was a terribly paced, buggy mess that went from okay in the first act to just awful for every other part, which is very confusing when you consider how well the early builds of the game were received. As time went on, the adaptive AI and horror elements of the game went by the wayside in favor of puzzles on top of puzzles and an extremely vague storyline. Apparently, this wasn't much of a winning strategy if the Metacritic score is to be believed. The sequel hasn't really been on my radar, which isn't surprising because YouTube has been very quiet about it. Some of you might remember the countless YouTubers who made several videos about the first game before and after it released. But I haven't heard a goddamn peep out of any of the channels I follow about the sequel. In all fairness, I haven't really looked into it very much either. I tend not to give companies my money if their first game wasn't great. I know this means I'm not giving them a path to redemption, but I'm also a greedy little Irishman and I've never pretended to be anything but. That being said, the demo for the sequel just came out, and for the low easy price of nothing, how could I not use it to farm content? So without further delay, let's jump into what this demo does right and what it doesn't. Let's start with the graphics. This game looks great, which isn't surprising because even with all the flaws the first game had, it never looked bad. The graphics here have a bit of a tune-up, and the game still has that semi-Pixar look, which it pulls off rather nicely. The lighting effects and the environments are very easy on the eyes, and honestly, I imagine the rest of the game will probably look like this. The sound design is serviceable. It's not great, but it isn't bad either. I don't think it's a matter of quality, but rather this game really doesn't have much music. In the demo, at least. There are moments when the neighbor is looking for you or chasing you where a song or two will play, which fit right in, but otherwise, this game is very quiet. The sound effects from throwing things or running around are about what I'd expect. Nothing mind-blowing, but nothing really feels out of place either, or, particularly jarring. So, what about the gameplay? Honestly, the gameplay has me a bit worried. The demo is centered around solving puzzles to break into the neighbor's basement, which is very much the premise of the first game. It's fitting for a demo, I don't have any issues with that. What I do take issue with is just how much the gameplay feels like the first game in all the wrong ways. If you disliked the parkour elements in the first game, you may not care for them in this one either. They fine-tuned things a little bit, giving your character the ability to jump over ledges and climb onto them when you jump at them, but this starts being an issue if you try to climb anything that isn't an even surface. There's a part in the demo where you need to scale up the counter to solve a puzzle, and it's a lot like watching an epileptic 9-year-old watching the blenders after putting all of his crayons in it. I had to beat my spacebar like it was late with the rent, and I managed to climb up after a while, but I was just immediately reminded of how janky the parkour was in the first game. I'm hoping they managed to iron that out, but the full version of this game drops in a few months. I'm not exactly optimistic about it. It also feels like they haven't fixed the neighbor's AI either. I lost him by running around in a circle more than once. We also shared a rather passionate stare down when I managed to climb on top of one of the several wardrobes he just randomly placed around the house. He didn't throw anything at me like he would in the first game, which is kind of fair since he didn't seem to mind me fastballing rocks and crowbars at him. If stunning him is a mechanic they've gotten rid of, I'm not sure that's a great choice. The puzzles themselves felt fine, they weren't anything crazy, but they weren't terrible either. Nothing felt unfair or obnoxious, which is a good start. I never completed a puzzle and then said thank Christ that's over, which is a pretty decent shift from the first one. None of them felt cheap, and they're all relatively straightforward. The hints around the map are useful, and they don't feel too subtle or too loud. That is one thing I'll give the demo, the puzzles were pretty decent. The overall playtime for the demo was about 40 minutes, which is about what I'd expect. I can't say it was bad, but it just left me overall unimpressed. It feels like more of the first game, which isn't really a compliment. The demo of a game is usually a studio's attempt to draw in attention by putting its best foot forward. If that's the case here, then I'm a bit concerned by what I saw in my playthrough. My biggest worry outside of this feeling like a copy and paste of the first game is the demo feels like content that won't be in the main game. Something about it just has that we made this strictly for this demo feel, and that's worrying because that very much borders on dishonest marketing tactics. Like I said, the demo wasn't bad, but it just wasn't great. It didn't wow me, and with the legacy this franchise has, that's both disappointing but somehow not surprising. I feel like the full game is going to share a lot of the major issues the first one had. I hope I'm wrong, and if I am, please feel free to come back in about 3 months and dislike this video. But this demo did very little to get me hyped. I also went back and retried some of the early alphas of this game, and they did not do much to help with that feeling. If this demo was a 5 out of 10, then those were easily a 3 or a 4. If you want to see a really janky or buggy mess, then I highly recommend going back and trying those. Unless you really liked the first game, I wouldn't recommend pre-ordering this one, or even picking it up on release. Let someone else take that bullet for you and wait for the reviews to come out. Hell, I'll do it for you if I have to. I won't like it, but I'll gladly take your watch time for it. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. If you want to help support what I do here, then please consider swinging by my Patreon. Every bit helps, and I'll love you forever, even if your parents don't. Thank you all again, and I'll see you all next time.